This is the oldest car I've ever driven. It's a 1962 Lancia Appia Series 3, 60 years old this year, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's also one of the most beautifully built cars I've ever driven, and I'm including Porsches, Audis, BMWs, the whole lot. So it's worth beginning with the story of how the Appia fits into the world. The story of Lancia is worth a whole film in its own right, but for now let's just say that it was an innovative, luxurious and willfully engineering-led business that very much ploughed its own furrow until it was bought by Fiat in 1969, and indeed for several years after that as well. This era of Lancia began in 1937 with the Aprilia, an upmarket family saloon featuring unibody construction, a first for a production car, pillarless doors, advanced aerodynamics, sliding pillar suspension and a V4 engine, a format Lancia had invented in the Lambda of 1922. The Aprilia was followed in 1939 by a baby sister, the Ardea, which offered all of those things in a smaller and very pretty package. Later Ardeas featured the world's first production 5-speed gearbox. In 1950, the family-sized Aprilia was replaced by the Aurelia, again with those Lancia signature features, plus the first mass-produced V6 engine. Aurelias go for big money these days, especially the coach-built coupe and open versions. And then, at its home motor show in Turin in 1953, Lancia launched the Appia, a scaled-down and technically simplified Aurelia, to replace the Ardea. Series 1 Appias, like this one I saw at the Festival of the Unexceptional, had an aerodynamic sloping tail reminiscent of the Ardea, while Series 2s and 3s got a more 1960s modern 3-box sticking out boot, and a slightly longer wheelbase for even more interior space. Series 3s also got a modernised nose. All Appias featured a 1089cc V4 engine, although each successive version squeezed a few more horsepower out of it. It was a very compact unit, with only about 10 degrees between the Vs. It's very noisy in here, but that's mostly because I've got the window open. It's a real fun car to drive, this. It's from the 1950s. This is actually quite a late one. It's a very early 60s, 1962 I think. But it's definitely a 50s car. But saying that, it's a lot more capable than I would have expected a 1950s car to be. It's not super fast, but it's perfectly able to keep up at 50 odd miles an hour here. The column shift gear change is really nice and easy. It's got no synchro on first or second. Second in particular just needs a little pause in neutral on the way there from first. First is a little bit more sensitive to get to. And probably needs you to come to a stop or properly fully double D-clutch. The cabin is fantastic. I mean, I love this. I love the colour scheme. The grey and the beige here together is just so early 60s, mid-century cool. Fantastic Blaupunkt stereo, I think original to the car, certainly contemporary with the car. Really funky gauges, in Italian of course. The left-hand one is benzina, acqua and olio, and then kilometres per hour on the right-hand side. Bunch of toggle switches here which do things with lights and wipers and stuff. Really nicely finished handles and switchgear and stuff. You remember the kind of late 90s, early 2000s TVRs and the way that they had things milled out of aluminium? There's that kind of feel to this switchgear. Opening quarter lights for ventilation, there we go. No more to that than there needs to be. It's really nicely engineered. This particular car is left-hand drive, having started its life in Italy before being imported to the UK a couple of years ago. What I didn't know until the chap with the Appia at the Festival of the Unexceptional told me is that until the 1950s the majority of Lancias were actually right-hand drive.
Italy started out as a right-hand drive country but converted to left-hand drive fairly early on, except for some of the cities. The cities where there were trams carried on being right-hand drive until the mid-1920s. So part of Italy was left-hand drive and part of it was right-hand drive, and there were signs as you entered the city that told you when you needed to swap sides. I have no idea what swapping sides would have looked like. Driving into Italian cities is complicated enough as it is, as I found some years ago at the cost of a back bumper on an Audi A4, without having to swap which side of the road you're on at the same time as everybody else. So Lancia continued to offer right-hand drive as an option in Italy all the way through the 1950s and into the early 1960s. In fact, the majority of Series 1 Lancia Appias were right-hand drive, although that had swapped round by the time we got to the Series 3 like this one in the 1960s. Meanwhile, back to driving the car in the UK.
And I found third. There we go. That column shift manual does take a little bit of getting used to. You have to kind of imagine the H pattern just on its side. Hear that raughty V4. It's not super fast, but it does keep up. It's quite responsive. And would have been quite lively really quite lively by the standards of its day for a sort of small family saloon. The 1100cc V4 engine is only about the same size as a dual-lit toaster, but it manages to summon up 47 horsepower and a fairly impressive 63 pound-foot of torque, which is really useful when it comes to getting about. The handling and road holding are pretty good, so it tends to be your faith in the capacity of the brakes that limits your desire to go very fast. The brakes are pretty good for the period, which is to say, they're not very good. But they're not bad. The steering is probably the thing that dates it the most. It's not bad, but it's a bit... there's a little bit of play around the centre, and then when it does turn in, it really turns in. It's not very progressive. It takes a little bit of getting used to. Once you are used to it, it tracks around quite nicely. The ride's very good. It lollops along nicely. Sliding pillar suspension, Lancia speciality in this. With sliding pillar suspension, a vertical sprung pillar slides up and down inside a fixed sleeve, while also acting as the kingpin for the steering. There's also a damper, not shown here for simplicity, and because I've already spent quite long enough on this 3D animation log. It's got plenty of grip, and it absorbs the bumps really well, without feeling floaty or wallowy. I think I'm actually understating this. It's a very comfortable car, particularly when you consider its age and its small size. Hardly any pitch, and not a lot of roll either. The corner's really flat. There's no seatbelts, of course. Well, not of course, there are no seatbelts. I'm very upright on this bench. It's comfortable. I feel like I could sit here for a long time. The only thing is I do have a slight feeling that I've got Lucy Clayton looking over my shoulder checking my deportment, because it kind of puts you into such a sort of officially correct posture. And while the car doesn't roll, because it's a bench seat, you do have to sort of grip on a bit to stop yourself sliding along. It's not really slidey, it's a mixture of, I don't know, is that leather or vinyl and cloth. The interior is definitely one of my favourite things about the Appia. It has that beautiful mid-century Italian style, it's beautifully put together, and everything has been designed with panache and a delicate economy. It's utterly Dolce Vita cool. If you think a Lancia Appia might be for you, and I can certainly see how you might, then they do come up for sale quite regularly in the UK and in Italy. A tidy berliner like this will cost you £10,000 or so, although you can spend multiples of that on a coupe or convertible hand-built by the likes of Zagato or Vignale. 10k is probably a bit more than the equivalent Wolseley 1500 or something, but the Appia is so much more stylish, intelligent and technically interesting. It's like comparing Hedy Lamarr with Hyacinth Bucket.
I really enjoyed that. That's a lot of fun.